The 70s and 80s gave us some of country music's most legendary voices. Waylon, Willie, Dolly, and George were dominating the airwaves, but for every superstar, there was a band that broke through with one big hit and then disappeared. Some had label issues, others were too ahead of their time, and some just never got the second chance they deserved. In this video, we're looking at 10 country bands from the 70s and 80s who had that one unforgettable song and then faded into the honky-tonk shadows. Let's get into it. 10. The Amazing Rhythm Aces. Third Rate Romance, 1975.
Trying to keep his courage up by applying booze.
They had the perfect blend: Southern soul, country twang, and laid-back storytelling. And in 1975, Third Rate Romance became a surprise hit, even reaching the pop charts. It was clever, smooth, and catchy as hell. The kind of song that made you smirk, tap your fingers on the steering wheel, and replay it just to catch the lyrics again. But despite critical acclaim and a loyal fan base, the Aces couldn't land another big mainstream hit. Follow-up singles like Amazing Grace, used to be her favorite song, showed their range, but radio stations didn't know what to do with them.
She was an angel for sure.
They were too country for rock radio and too rock for country radio. A classic case of falling through the cracks and staying there even though they deserved more. 9. The Kendalls, Heaven's Just a Sin Away, 1977. This father-daughter duo raised some eyebrows, but man, could they sing. Heaven's Just a Sin Away hit #1 on the country charts and even won a Grammy. It was bold, catchy, and just a little bit controversial. The perfect combination for late 70s country radio. Their tight harmonies and unique dynamic made them stand out in a crowded scene. But after that, they released more music, but none of it struck the same chord with the public. Songs like Sweet Desire and You'd Make an Angel Wanna Cheat got some attention, but nothing ever matched that first big spark. Their harmonies were beautiful, their chemistry was undeniable. But outside that one shining moment, they never found the same level of fame again. But if you thought that band vanished fast, wait until you hear what happened to the next one. 8. Brush Arbor, That's the Way Love Goes, 1973. They had the talent. They even won the ACM's Most Promising Vocal Group. And their version of That's the Way Love Goes got them noticed. Smooth, emotional, and full of potential. For a brief moment, Brush Arbor seemed poised to join the ranks of country's rising stars. They had the harmonies, the look, and the kind of sound that felt both classic and fresh.
Only for the love of the Lord.
But just when it looked like they were taking off, nothing. Radio cooled, labels lost interest, and momentum faded faster than expected. The song would later become a huge hit for Merle Haggard, but for Brush Arbor, it was a peak they couldn't top. And while they continued making music, their names slowly slipped from the mainstream's memory. 7. Bandana, The Killin' Kind, 1984. If you were into country rock in the mid-80s, you might remember Bandana. Their song The Killin' Kind hit the charts and hinted at something big. A little rough around the edges, but polished just enough to make radio take notice. They had tight harmonies, a gritty edge, and the look of a band ready to break through. There was energy, charisma, and the kind of stage presence that made you think, these guys are going somewhere. But changes in the lineup and label instability stalled their rise. Follow-up singles failed to gain traction and industry support dried up fast. And just like that, gone. Another promising act swallowed up by the business side of the music business. That might have been a short-lived hit. But the next band, they barely made it through the door. 6. The Wright Brothers Band, Made in the USA, 1981.
Sing the love song as we go along.
Patriotic, catchy, and loaded with heart. Made in the USA gave the Wright Brothers Band their moment in the spotlight. It celebrated American pride without being preachy, and it resonated with working-class listeners across the country. It was the kind of song you'd expect to become a 4th of July anthem. Flags waving, barbecues grilling, and this playing in the background. It had all the ingredients of a long-lasting country classic. But lightning didn't strike twice. Despite their talent and tight sound, the band never charted again. They continued performing, especially regionally, but the national spotlight moved on. leaving Made in the USA as both their calling card and their curtain call. 5. Eli Radish Band. Plastic Jesus, 1970. They were early pioneers of the country rock movement. Raw, weird, and way ahead of their time. The Eli Radish Band didn't sound like anyone else, and they didn't try to. Their version of Plastic Jesus turned heads. Part satire, part sermon, wrapped in a hazy, offbeat groove that made you stop and say, "What am I listening to?" It was clever, biting, and totally out of step with what Nashville wanted. The band's rebellious image and unconventional sound didn't sit well with country gatekeepers. Long hair, political jabs, and a rock and roll attitude, that just didn't fly in Music City at the time, and the mainstream just wasn't ready for them. They were gone almost as quickly as they came. But years later, artists would trace their roots back to bands like Eli Radish, the ones who dared to be different before it was cool. They had one shot, but the next band, they had the right song at the wrong time. Part 4, The Shoppa. Doesn't Anybody Get High on Love Anymore? 1981. With a name like The Shoppa, you might not expect much, but they delivered one big emotional hit in the early 80s. Doesn't Anybody Get High on Love Anymore wasn't flashy, but it hit a nerve. It had that soft rock meets country feel that was radio gold at the time. Smooth harmonies, gentle guitars, and lyrics that tapped into a quiet kind of longing. The kind of song that made you roll down the windows and just listen. But the momentum didn't last. Despite their polished sound and clear vocal talent, the group couldn't follow it up with another hit. They faded back into obscurity not long after, leaving behind just one track that still pops up on the occasional nostalgic playlist. Sometimes one hit is all you get, but if it sticks, that's enough to be remembered. 3. Silver. Wham Bam Shangalang, 1976. It's more soft rock than straight country. But Silver straddled the line with a sound that had definite twang appeal. They were one of those in-between bands, too polished for outlaw country, but too rootsy for mainstream pop. Wham Bam Shangalang was everywhere in the summer of '76. It had that sunny AM radio charm, pure ear candy with a chorus that stuck in your head for days. It even made its way into movies and commercials years later, and then nothing. No follow-up hit, no second wave. The band vanished as quickly as they arrived. Fun fact, a young Brent Mydland, who would later join the Grateful Dead, was a member. So while the band faded, one of its players would go on to make rock history in a very different lane. But as quick as their moment came, it went. And the next band's story might be even sadder. Number 2, Southern Pacific, New Shade of Blue, 1988. A supergroup made up of former members of Creedence Clearwater Revival and the Doobie Brothers. Sounds like a recipe for success, right? And for a moment, it was. New Shade of Blue hit the top of the country charts in 1988. It was slick, melodic, and radio-ready, a perfect blend of roots rock and Nashville polish. They had the chops, the pedigree, and the backing of a major label. But country audiences weren't quite sure what to make of them. Were they rock? Were they country? Were they both? The sound was solid, but the identity was a little blurry. That uncertainty made them a short-lived success. Despite their talent and big-name backgrounds, Southern Pacific couldn't find a firm home in either world. And in the end, they became a fascinating what could have been in country music history. And finally, number 1. They were on millions of TV screens across America. But when it came to the charts, they never quite broke through. They had the look, the platform, and a legendary song. So what happened? Let's talk about number 1, the Hagers, and how a primetime spotlight still couldn't save their place in country music history. You might remember these identical twins from their regular appearances on Hee Haw. Tall, clean-cut, and always dressed to match, the Hagers became familiar faces to millions of viewers every week. Their cover of Merle Haggard's Silver Wings got them brief attention on country radio. It was heartfelt, polished, and a respectful nod to one of country's greats. And for a moment, it looked like they were on the brink of something big. They had the image, the voices, and the exposure, but not the staying power. Despite being on one of the most watched shows in America, their music career never fully took off. They remained more recognizable for their TV presence than their discography. A case of fame without lasting musical impact.
It's been one cold and dreadful winter.
Still, for anyone watching country television in the 70s, the Hagers were impossible to miss, even if their chart time was short-lived. Sometimes one hit is all it takes to become a footnote in country history. And for these bands, that footnote still echoes through jukeboxes, dusty vinyl, and old cassette tapes in glove compartments. Maybe they didn't become legends, but for one moment they were everywhere. Which of these bands do you remember? Drop your favorite one-hit country wonder in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories Nashville forgot.